On today's episode of Inside the Mavs, we continue to get you ready for game one of the NBA Finals, and I had to bring along a friend on the other side of the world that knows a little something about Mavericks basketball, specifically, of course, with Luka Dončić. Iztok Franko joining me here on the Inside the Mavs podcast, presented by Aura. Welcome to Inside the Mavs, presented by Aura. I'm your host, Kevin Gray, Mavericks pre- and post-game host of the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. Appreciate you joining us here for the latest episode of Inside the Mavs. Make sure you download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. If you watch this on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports, make sure you like and comment on the video as well. So excited for this episode as we continue to get you ready for the NBA Finals with game one on Thursday night between your Dallas Mavericks and the Boston Celtics. The Mavericks back in the NBA Finals for the third time in franchise history. Luka Dončić making his first NBA Finals appearance. Kyrie Irving making his fourth NBA Finals appearance among many storylines. And joining me on the show today from Slovenia, you can find him on Twitter at Iztok_Franko, covers the Dallas Mavericks for D Magazine. Iztok Franko joining me on the podcast. Iztok, what's going on?
Hi, Karen. Excited, waiting for finals to start, right?
The anticipation, yes, has been building and growing, and I think a lot of us are ready just to get these two teams on the floor. Before we dive into how we feel like the Mavericks are going to be able to play against this Celtics team and some of the things that they'll be having to do to try and win this series, can you just describe to me just your excitement about having watched this team, specifically with Luka Dončić, of course, and what this means to be able to see this team in the NBA Finals after this incredible season they've had thus far?
Crazy, right? It's, I don't know, never, as detailed as we followed this team during this season, I think it still caught us by surprise. Not by the play, because they played better and better, I would say, but just the level that they raised their level of play to is something that's really amazing to watch and great to watch, basically.
Yeah.
We've been in playoff series the past. There were some good series, but I don't know, beating all these good teams, especially the last two rounds, I think it's been really, in Luka's word, amazing.
It has been amazing. Watch this team finally get past the Clippers, taking out the Oklahoma City Thunder, who was the number one seed, and the Minnesota Timberwolves, who arguably had, aside from Boston, the best defense in the league, and of course the Mavericks taking care of them in 5 games. Luka Dončić, the Western Conference Finals MVP. And this talk between Luka and Kyrie, we've talked a lot about their duo and their partnership, but we've seen it be taken to another level in this postseason. What has you enjoyed most about watching those two grow together and how they've been able to put it together going into this NBA Finals against a very talented Boston team?
Just the chemistry and trust, I think, and their mutual, I wouldn't say even appreciation, I would say admiration for each other that they have. You can see it when they play, how they speak of each other. And I don't know, often as we dissect, actions, X and O's, some plays, people would say, okay, they need to play more actions off each other. But what I see is there are these small moments. They happen like 1, 2, 3 times a game when you can just see that the things between them click, So there is this quick pass from Luka to Kyrie in transition, a quick give and go, just a short screen in action. And I think they really not only trust, but they know now each other. The chemistry has really grown. They know when to play off each other, when they know when the other one has it going, needs to attack. So I think that part, apart from the leadership, to me, it's really amazing to watch, because I can see it in both or listening to them, and you probably know better because you're there up close when they talk. And the way they talk, I don't think it's fake or it's. I think it's really real how they talk of each other and how they respect each other.
Yeah, no, they seem to have a genuine bond between the two of them. And Luka Dončić at 25 years of age, watching Kyrie Irving now in his early 30s, having gone through a lot of the things in this league to get to this point. Their partnership has been amazing to watch, to be able to now see them on this stage. And when you start to think about this finals and the way that the Mavericks have gotten here, what has stood out to you most about the Mavericks, either offensively or defensively, that you feel like has to play itself out when they take on Boston starting on Thursday night?
I mean, it's the defense. And every series that we started, we say, okay, when we started with Clipper series, it's okay, can regular season, these last 15 games, amazing defense translate to playoffs? Check mark. Okay, against Harden, against PG, maybe not against Kawhi, but still. Then OKC, this is a whole another beast. I don't know, top offense, top defensive team. Can they stop this, let's say, spread out, Shea, this great Thunder offense? And again, they manage. And then the same with the Timberwolves. I don't know, against Ant, against Conley, against Cat. I think every stage, every hurdle, the defense stepped up. Because I think we kind of knew that offense will come around, especially with Luka and Kyrie. And now when you say Boston, it's the defense, because this is, again, whole another challenge, I would say. Defensively, it's like this spread out, 5 out Boston, 8 players in the rotation that they play, or incredible shooters, great spacing, 2 bigs that will space, I don't know, 5 feet behind the 3-point line. So I think it's, again, the same question. If we question something, probably most people question the defense. And it's kind of funny because they proved it now over a 3 playoff series, and also like last 20, 30 games of the regular season, that they can defend. But I think the same question probably remains.
Yeah, and as you've gone through in terms of your information going into this finals, I encourage you, by the way, if you're not following Iztok on Twitter, you need to. He's got a tremendous thread of information that will get you primed and ready for this series. And one of the things that you talk about is, you know, the 5-out offense that Boston plays, and not only that, but the isolation that they play with, whether it be Tatum and Brown, and some of the issues that can cause for this Mavericks team. And we've now learned that Kristaps Porzingis looks like we'll be ready for game 1 starting on Thursday as well. How does Porzingis change the dynamic of what Boston is able to do, especially with his ability to stretch the floor from the 3-point line, and also on the defensive end, what he's able to do from a rim protection standpoint that allows Boston to maybe have some success against Dallas in this series?
Yeah, first of all, like I said, we had 2 great stretch bigs who can defend, who can protect the rim, in Horford and Porzingis. So the first thing that Porzingis brings is allowing Al Horford to go back to his 20 minutes. He's 38, so I think expecting him to play like a huge role in this series, fighting lively, fighting effort, would be just too much, as good as he is. Second, he brings another dimension in terms of range and in terms of size. A lot of question is how will the Mavericks be able to closing out on a 3-point shot of a 7-3 standard. It's like it's not possible to do, right? So that's another thing. And what Celtics did during the regular season successfully when hunting those switches, and they are, like I wrote in the preview, 2 of the top teams, Dallas and Boston, in terms of hunting that mismatch and then going into one-on-one in isolation. So what they did, they mixed it up, not only attacking with Tatum and Brown, but also attacking a favorable matchup. For example, if Kyrie switches on KP, they went a lot to that in the mid-post, in the mid-range, or in the post. So that's one thing, that dimension that Porzingis brings. But we'll see. I think he's kind of put in difficult position. I think it's getting now missed a lot of time and going all in the intensity of game 1 of the NBA finals. Not only that, you cannot, like we saw with Maxi Kleber, you cannot ease into these games. If you will not shoot automatically, if you not make the second shot, there will be each more pressure with each additional shot. And I think people in Dallas could see in the past that KP maybe is a guy who or analyzes things a little bit or thinks at some point. So I think for some things this is great because he's a student of the game. He will learn about the game, about tendencies. But when it comes to maybe pressure, maybe playing freely, which is by itself very difficult to do in the finals. But I think that is one probably storyline is how quickly can he get back to the level where he was, and how freely does he play? Does he maybe even disrupt what they had with Horford? Because a lot of things looked pretty smooth, although the competition was a little bit limited.
Yeah, Porzingis in the past, especially when he was here in Dallas, was always talking about, playing in rhythm, getting certain shots at certain points to be able to get himself going into games. And I guess the luxury of playing with a team like Boston is you've got Jason Tatum, you've got Jaylen Brown, you've got other guys to be able to kind of ease your way back in, so there isn't that immediate pressure for Porzingis to try and perform as quickly, but they're going to need what he brings to be able to help them in the series against, in Dallas that way. So, when I think about not just for Porzingis himself, but also, a lot will be made with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and how terrific they are, obviously, but I'm looking at guys like Derek White and also Drew Holiday as well, the defense that both of them provides, but also their abilities to shoot the ball from three. How vital are they going to be, and what are the Mavericks going to have to do to try to attack those two players, given how good they are defensively, to try to create pressure on them on that end of the floor there?
I think and that's why Boston is so good. That's why they won 64 games. Imagine having two all defense kind of a guys, but not being maybe not even your primary defenders. So this is what I'm worried about the most is, for example, not if Drew Holiday can defend Luka or if will he, but more like what are Derek White and Drew Holiday doing in the, let's say, in terms of help defense, because they're really smart, they're high IQ players. And we saw that with Minnesota, maybe as good as they were, the best defensive teams, but they had like a great anchor in Rudy Gobert. They had like great point of attack defenders in terms of Jalen McDaniels and Anthony Edwards. But they had a weak link in, let's say, Mike Conley, who is small and, let's say, like a wet. And also, Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards are not great off-ball defenders.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the dimension I think that Boston has on defense with Drew, with Derek White. Derek White is one of the best guard shot blockers of all time. Drew is a ball hawk on defense. So I think Boston will pressure, like others, like OKC, will try to pressure others into making plays, and they will scramble at some point in the series, like in 4-on-3, like other teams did, or like other teams did versus Dallas. But I think the IQ and the skill they have in those two guys is going to be even a more difficult challenge for Dallas. And then on the other end, it's similar stuff. One thing that, let's say, bothered or was a problem for Minnesota, was a problem for OKC when Dallas shrinked the defense against the opposing stars, is they didn't have so many ball handlers. Minnesota had Mike Conley. Let's say OKC had Jalen Williams, who was struggling, or some other guys. But here we have two other guys, apart from the two stars, who are really capable of attacking closeouts and actually thrive in that role. Typically, they are not, I would say, your main primary creators for most of the games or primary stars. But both of these two guys, Drew and White, are very good at attacking closeouts. They can handle the ball, they can drive, they can kick, they can shoot. So again, these two guys, I think having them as your fourth or third best guy or fourth or fifth even, it's an amazing luxury to have.
Yeah, and the Mavericks will have their hands full dealing with this team, given the amount of talent and skill set that this team provides going into the NBA Finals. Let's take a quick break here on Inside the Mavs. More with Iztok Franko and how the Mavericks can get after this Celtics team and what advantages they will have against Boston starting in the NBA Finals. But before we get there, let's hear from today's sponsor, our video and our podcast, and let's hear from Aura. Today's video is brought to you by Aura. Do a Google search on your name and email address to see how much information comes up about you. I was devastated by the amount of information that I could be seeing searching my name and profile, and I knew then I needed to be protected for not just myself, but also for my family. Data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, health records, your relatives, it's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats that I can't see. It's really easy to set up, so I don't have to download several different apps to get things like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more. I get everything at one affordable price. You may already have one of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. Aura is always on, doing the hard work to protect me and my family so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. I value my privacy and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/Kevin Gray to start your 2-week free trial. Please see the link in the description. Back here on Inside the Mavs, thank you for hanging out with us through our spot there. And thank you to today's sponsor of our video and our podcast in Aura with Iztok Franko of D Magazine. Here on the Inside the Mavs podcast, continue to get you ready for game 1 of the NBA Finals. And Iztok, we've talked about some of the things that Boston has been successful at doing this year. We know how much they rely on the three-point line, but also that's something that could get them in trouble as well when they've not won games and relying on that three-point shot. Do you believe that the Mavericks, who have really changed the way that they've played, a team that was bombing away from the three-point line, relied on the three-point shot themselves, but obviously changed into a much more defensive team, do they have the capabilities of keeping up with maybe sometimes the math game that the Boston Celtics like to play when it comes to the three-point line in that way?
Yeah, we'll see that. I think you're correct. I think they have the highest three-point frequency in the playoffs. By far, they had it the highest in the regular season. Joe Mazzulla often talks even about internal benchmarks, how many threes that they need to hit. And they typically win when they, not only when they shoot a lot of them, make a lot of them, but when they shoot, when they take a lot of them. So that's one of the things. Do they have a backup plan like the Mavericks do? Because we've seen Dallas win games even when they shot poorly these playoffs, either with defense, either with transition, either with great, mid-range game by Luka or Kyrie. We'll see that about Boston. I think they're certainly more dependent on the three-point shot than the Mavericks are. But like you said, when they're making them, it's very hard to keep up with the math game, because they make so many threes. But that's going to be one part. Again, like we talked with KP, I think it's also with others. I think the setup and the pressure and the stage of the NBA Finals is so different, so much bigger, that I think we might get to see somebody going, through a shooting slump, something like that. It could be on either side, but we'll see if that happens for Boston. I think I wrote in this series preview that I think Dallas, in a way, will need somebody or even two guys, from, let's say, the role players in terms of KP, in terms of Drew, who is a great shooter this playoffs, this season. But we saw him, shoot 30% in the playoffs, in the finals with the Bucks. So somebody from this group, either Horford, maybe White, if one or two of these guys can struggle from the three-point line, I think it's going to get much easier for Dallas. If not, I think they still have a chance, but it's going to be much harder. And they'll need to, the error margin of error for them on the other end is going to be much smaller. They will need much better offensive games. Even if you saw the series with the Pacers, they were like this, completely opposite to what we were seeing in the West Coast, in the Western Conference Finals. It was this run and gun three-point shows, like results in 120s, like we see in the regular season.
Yeah, and the Mavericks, for them offensively, we know how much they love to shoot the corner threes. Boston, they don't allow you to shoot a lot of corner threes, and not only do they not allow you to shoot corner threes, you don't make them either. The ones that you do get to take from the corners when they do have those open. What does that mean for guys like PJ Washington, Derrick Jones Jr., to a lesser degree, Josh Green? Some of these guys, especially for Washington, who have been, and Jones really have been camped out in those left and right corners, making a lot of those 3-pointers. How do they adjust to that, given what the Boston Celtics like to take away in those corner threes like that?
I think this, if you reverse engineer this, how the corner threes happen, typically it's out some sort of rotation. And what that means that typically Boston doesn't allow them is they prefer to switch and play more like straightforward one-on-one defense. So they trust in their individual defenders because they have like 5 or all 5 are capable defenders, and they don't want to be scrambling. But what we've seen in the playoffs, and especially with Dallas, is that during the course of a playoff series, typically Luka and Kyrie, to a lesser extent, will make you scramble your key defensive principles and change it. Minnesota, for example, had kind of the same principles. So they didn't allow a lot of corner threes and things like that. And then I think it was game 3 or 4, they allowed more than 20. So it's that, I think, is one of the quality that we've seen in the past from Luka and J. Kidd, but especially in these playoffs. And I wrote about this, tweeted about this in the past. On offense, it seems as the series progressed, it's happened in the first round, in the second round, in the conference finals. Dallas tends to get better and better offensive process-wise. They tend to, what I wrote, they tend to wear on their opponent. It's not fun defending Luka Dončić for the whole series. You get physically and mentally worn down. And I think these 3 guys who are the key of Dallas offense, so J. Kidd and Luka and Kyrie, I think they tend to figure out where to find these cracks, how to get teams in rotation. So that's going to be probably the first move in the chess match. Will Luka and Kyrie, if Boston is starting with the switching defense, more switch-heavy defense, will they be able to score? Because once they do, then the corner threes for the guys like PJ, Derrick Jones, Josh Green, Maxi Kleber, and others will be there.
It's interesting that you say that because, I mean, you're right. It's no fun guarding Luka and Kyrie for a 6-7 game series. And we've seen the Mavericks be a really good counterpunching team. There's been a lot of criticism of this team under Jason Kidd in terms of not winning game ones. They're 1-5 under Jason Kidd in the playoffs in game ones. But really, in a series like this, I wouldn't imagine you can afford to have that kind of feeling out process when it comes to playing a team as good as Boston. Do you feel like the Mavericks will have to be much more aggressive at the beginning of this series, specifically in game 1, to really try to ensure that they are locked in, especially with the Celtics team that can at times run you out of the gym and with the way that they shoot the ball from the 3 in that way?
Yeah, we'll see. That game 1 will be incredibly interesting. We talked about KP and the long layoff factor. Both teams, Boston, I don't know, almost more than 10 days of rest. Dallas, a week. Mm-hmm. So you never know in these games how teams respond, how much time do they need to get in the rhythm. So it's going to be, I don't know, I think it's going to be a tricky game for both sides. Which team responds better, that's, I think, very difficult to predict. But maybe going back to your notion that they try to ease in or try to let's see the opponents throw the first punch. I think it also speaks about confidence that, I don't know, J. Kidd, Kyrie especially. If you listen to Kyrie over this season, he was often talking about chess match. Let's see the first move of the opponent. And I would say it's more credit to what the Mavericks did, that maybe in neither of this series, okay, we got to game 6, but they didn't really had to do this final chess moves, so really play like a desperate team. So I think there is still something there, there's still a level probably to get to, because they closed this, mostly took care of business in all these series in game 5 typically, especially versus OKC then versus the Clippers when they won this, went up 3-2, and you kind of see in the opponents that basically they figured it out. So I agree with you that versus against Boston, you probably, again, it's going to be the most difficult challenge. But I think this team, even if they lose game one, we know they won't panic. This is something that we learned. And is this confidence or overconfidence? I would rather say the first. So they are confident and they know they will figure it out.
Yeah, a team that's been 7-2 on the road so far this postseason. They've been on better on the road than they've been at home, and a team that was 23-9 in the clutch this year. So when you get this Mavericks team in the last 5 minutes of games, you don't necessarily want to be in that spot because they've proven not only throughout the regular season but in the postseason as well that they can win those kinds of close games. And it's interesting because they haven't played an elimination game yet. So to your point, we haven't seen their backs up against the wall in that way in terms of having to fight their way out of elimination spot. They've had everyone else on the ropes, even with losing, the game ones that they have. And, one of the things that you also talked about as well, particularly for the Mavericks, that could be successful for them is that when Boston isn't necessarily playing well and losing games, they tend to get dominated on the offensive glass. And you've got two guys with Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford who have been tremendous on the glass and obviously defensively as well. The combination of the two of them playing that combination of 48 minutes has been fantastic for the Mavericks. How important is their role going to be, not just offensively for what they can do on the glass, but also how they defend, especially in space with a guy like Porzingis, who's going to be back, Horford to a degree as well. What are your thoughts about Gafford and Lively going into this series against Boston?
Yeah, one counter to switching on defense, and especially to the tactic that Boston used in the regular season, which is defend these two guys with a wing, with Jason Tatum typically, so they could switch the pick and rolls if it came to. So Luka Lively, Luka Gafford, they would just put Brown and Tatum on Luka and on Gafford or Lively, and they would just switch. So I think the best counter, or one of the counters for the biggest, because they are not like a post-up bigs that would then seal these guys in the post and punish them that way, but is to punish them on the defensive glass. To be honest, Boston is not a bad defensive team. They have typically one big. Sometimes they play with two bigs, but typically one. But their wings are long. Drew, White, they are all good rebounders. But that's one thing that I think where Lively and Gafford will need to make a difference. They will need to be active. They will need to be like 48 minutes of energy trying to, let's say, dominate offensive glass like they did versus OKC. Rim runs, again, one thing that you can punish because typically you're not running towards the rim against your matchup, or you can get a good position. So that's one thing. And the other thing, like you said, it's on the offensive glass. It's on the defensive end, so protecting the rim. And I think especially Lively, because I think as good as Gafford has been for the Mavericks, you can see there is like a level or two still a difference between him and Derek Lively. And that's a testament to how good Derek Lively is, basically, especially for a 20-year-old rookie. So I think we might see Lively's minutes because in the finals, no limits all bets are off. So I think we can see him playing high 30 minutes because he is, let's say, better defending, switching, scrambling, covering ground, rotating to a corner. So I think that is where he is much better than Daniel Gafford, who had like huge impact, especially in the late part of the Wolves series in protecting the rim. But I think Lively is much more mobile. So I think that's where we should see him. And the other part is we'll see how good Maxi Kleber will be. Because can he get in this time, in this week that they had, did he get all the way back? We saw he's not completely back to his old level that he was in the first round, shooting the ball. So I think if he can shoot the ball well from free, that's another level and another wrinkle that the Dallas can throw. And he's also another more mobile defender who is more, let's say, comfortable closing out, rotating, scrambling, and things like that.
Yeah, and to your point, especially with Maxi being back for this team as well, is I mean, the Mavericks are the healthiest team that the Boston Celtics are going to see this entire postseason. I mean, it's difficult to make a run to the finals as it is, but I mean, what the Celtics were able to deal with, no Jimmy Butler with the Miami Heat, obviously, Donovan Mitchell and Jared Allen being injured in the series with Cleveland, and then obviously Tyrese Halliburton not being able to finish the series against the Pacers. The Mavericks are going to be the healthiest team that the Celtics have faced all year. Does that make a difference for you in this series, or is it just more about what these two teams bring and which team will be able to execute what they do best during the course of this 7-game series?
First of all, I think it's just awesome to see two healthy teams facing up in the finals. So many times in the past, we had some injuries and things like that. So just by itself, I think that's great. And yes, I think for the Mavericks, I mean, we saw in past rounds what Maxi Kleber means to this team. I mean, they were not as much as reliant on him as in the past, but when he was out, it meant playing smaller. They had to move Derek Jones Jr. basically as a backup for. It means then Josh Green is playing the 3. So I think size-wise defense, he is still one of the best defenders on the team. So I think it's like a big plus and a lot of flexibilities. It's less pressure on PJ, and this is going to be huge again in this series to not get into foul trouble, because I guess PJ will have to guard probably Jaylen Brown if Derek Jones Jr. will guard Jason Tatum. So it's less pressure. It's another long defender that you can throw at those two guys. So I think just being healthy and all the options that Dallas has, I think, means a lot. So I think the Mavericks are a deep team. Probably, I would say deeper. Especially, I mean, Celtics are 1 to 6, one of the best teams we've seen in the recent history. And as good, I think, as Pritchard and Hauser are in terms of shooting the ball, they are not, let's say, the defenders or the athletes that Maxi Kleber is, Josh Green is, Derek Lively is off the bench. Hopefully, we see some Dante Exxon, or if not, again, Jaden Hardy. So I think it will be interesting how much both coaches shorten the rotation. We saw, for example, Joe Mazzulla in last closeout games versus Indiana. I think all these key guys played 40-plus minutes. So I guess in the finals, we will see even more of that. But I think that is maybe one advantage that the Mavericks have. So they are fully healthy, and not only stars, but also on their bench. So they have the ability to play this athletic defense for the whole game.
And of course, this series is going to be about the 4 major stars of this series between Luka, Kyrie, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown. Before we get there, I want to ask you real quick about the coaching matchup with Jason Kidd and Joe Mazzulla. In your mind, who has the coaching advantage here, especially the way that we've seen Jason Kidd really be able to take his game, quote unquote, to another level in this postseason? And obviously Joe Mazzulla back in the NBA Finals for this team. Who do you believe has the coaching advantage in this series here?
I don't know about coaching advantage, but I'm certain who has more pressure. And that's for sure Joe Mazzulla. And that's probably not easy to do, because I think for Jason Kidd, for the Mavericks, this is like, it's not like no pressure. They want to win the finals, but they overachieved basically, or exceeded expectations, while for the Boston Celtics, it's championship or bust, basically. And we know Joe Mazzulla is the youngest coach in the NBA, but we saw the critics last year in the playoffs when they lost against Miami in series they should won. So I think, especially if Boston has, let's say, gets behind in the series, I think there will be a lot of pressure on Joe Mazzulla. And we saw the critics in Boston media about him not calling timeouts, about this three-point dependent scheme, about crunch time offense. So I think these things didn't come out this year because the run through the playoffs was so smooth. But I think the pressure is much higher on Joe Mazzulla than it's on Jason Kidd. As it's for X and O's, I think I'm just confident in Jay Kidd, I think, and the whole group, as I said, to make the right adjustments to get through the series. Does it mean it will be enough to win? We'll see. We hope. But I think I'm not worried that they won't figure out. Although this defensive piece will be for me very interesting. How do they set up the scheme? How do they rotate? What do they give up in this series? Because one thing also I wrote about is Celtics are not a huge rim pressure team. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown has also almost 40% rim frequency in this series because of the space. So he's getting a lot of easy shots. And if we learned one thing in the past three series for Dallas, there is no easy shots in the paint. So I think Dallas will prioritize that, and probably it means less easy shots for Tatum and Brown. Probably means more for others, but again, it's more pressure for these two guys. Because of that, you basically are left with a lot of difficult shots. And when you come to the clutch, if you manage to win the mad game or keep up, then I think it bodes well for Dallas, because these guys won't have like a lot of points on their totals. And the other area that they are very good is the transition. So I think that's where Dallas will need to be very careful on offense, what they do, limiting turnovers, getting back. But they've been more or less a good transition team, something that's, again, a surprise that they weren't in the past.
Yeah, you got to be able to ensure that you're not costing yourself, because a team like Boston, they were the #1 team in the league this year in terms of turnovers. They don't turn the ball over, and they tend not to beat themselves. So when they're not bombing away from the three-point line, they're protecting the basketball as well when it comes to your opponent. And, last thing before we end today, because I think I have a good idea what your answer may be, but again, the series has come down to the 4 stars with Luka, Kyrie, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown. Which duo do you trust the most in this series when it's Luka and Kyrie versus Brown and Tatum, and what that can mean for ultimately how this finals goes between the Mavericks and the Celtics?
I mean, of course, we know the answer in Dallas, yes. So we trust Luka and Kyrie, but like I said, I think Boston is much more than that. Way less pressure on those guys to create everything and to really carry the burden. But I think, especially when we talk about Luka, I think he's a guy that you have to scheme the whole defense around, and he puts a lot of pressure. As I said, he wears on you over the course of the series. And if you do full circle to your first question about the chemistry and why about the fit between Luka and Kyrie, I think Kyrie really thrives on that he's not the focal point of the defensive game plan, that he can sometimes choose his spots, observe and see where he attacks, that he can play off Luka, that he can take over when Luka needs that. So I think that's really, this combination, as maybe unnatural as it seems last year, or as we were worried, these two ball-dominant guys, I think these two guys as a pair answered the question much more than Tatum and Brown. I think Tatum and Brown still play mostly not of each other, but they play well with Derek White, with Drew Holiday, a lot of pick and rolls with Derek White. But when it comes to crunch time, they go away a little bit, sometimes away from that offense. They go into, I don't know, ISO hero ball, because the pressure is for Tatum, all these narratives for Brown to outplay basically Luka. I'm sure he hears the noise, but in that situation, I would trust Luka and Kyrie to take the Mavericks to the promised land.
Well, that is certainly what we hope for over the course of this NBA Finals. It should be a tremendous series between two of the best teams, really, Boston all season long, but really both teams are the second half of the year were arguably the two best in the league going into the postseason. Now they've proven themselves here in the postseason. Iztok, tell the folks where they can find you and what we can expect from you in terms of your coverage of this finals going into this series here.
Yeah, so like I said, on Twitter, Iztok_Franko. We do breakdowns. I do breakdowns. We do also game notes before each of the game. There will be, of course, something on D Magazine. So D Magazine, we do recaps, observations of each game in the playoffs. So that's one thing, but also some other stuff. So there will be a lot of stuff going on, a lot of courage on the finals.
Well, I appreciate you hanging out with me. Again, if you have not followed Iztok on Twitter, I implore you to do so. He's got tremendous analysis and coverage of this team. And if you're a real Mavericks fan, you know exactly who Iztok is and what he brings to the table as he does tremendous work. And I'm so glad that he was able to spend some time with me. Iztok, it's always great to catch up with you, my friend. And I appreciate you hanging out with me here on the Inside the Mavs podcast once again today, man.
Thanks again, Kevin, for having me.
That'll do it for this episode of Inside the Mavs. Again, thank you to Iztok Franko for joining me here on the podcast today. Make sure you download and subscribe to it wherever you get your podcast for free. Give it a 5-star rating. Write a review for it while you're there. And if you're watching this on my YouTube channel, like and comment on the video as well. This has been Inside the Mavs, presented by Aura.